what is love to us and how are we really approaching it, right? Because, there's a lot of us that were hit as children. Is our parents loved us, right? And some kids were told, "Oh, I do this because I love you." But then later in life, you find yourself in an abusive relationship wondering why the hell and how you got there. Right? So I don't want that for my child. So do I want to keep repeating these cycles?
Ever feel like you suck at this job? Motherhood, I mean. Have too much anxiety and not enough patience? Too much yelling, not enough play? There's no manual, no village, no guarantees. The stakes are high. We want so badly to get it right. But this is survival mode. We're just trying to make it to bedtime. So if you're full of mom guilt, your temper scares you, you feel like you're screwing everything up, and you're afraid to admit any of those things out loud, this podcast is for you. This is Failing Motherhood. I'm Danielle Bettman, and each week we'll chat with a mom ready to be real, sharing her insecurities, her fears, her failures, and her wins. We do not have it all figured out. That's not the goal. The goal is to remind you, you are the mom your kids need. They need what you have, you are good enough, and you're not alone. I hope you pop in earbuds, somehow sneak away, and get ready to hear some hope from the trenches. You belong here, friend. We're so glad you're here. Hey, it's Danielle. You are in for a treat today. If you are at all trying to parent differently than how you were parented, then buckle up, because Christie is here to share her story and all of the complex layers that she has been able to peel from the onion. And we go deep. There are tears in both of our eyes at different parts of this episode. And she is so honest in being able to speak to how she tries to navigate her relationship with her dad living with her while she parents way differently than he did. She talks about having to parent now and the weight of the oldest daughter after her mom died, how she relates to the movie Encanto. She speaks to the ways that she was disciplined and how she is choosing differently because of where she ended up in her 20s and how that was related. And I really definitely want you to hear that part. And she shares a lot of the ways that she's kind of like reconciling a new relationship with religion. And her daughter is in a Catholic school and kind of what that means to her. She's just really honest. And even if you cannot relate to some of her story, even if you do not agree with some of her ideologies, even if you are just beginning your own journey of making sense of your own childhood and knowing how that plays a part in the decision you're making today with your child, I really, really encourage you to come in with an open mind and just hear her out, because when we hear stories of people that are different than us, we can gain so much insight and so much perspective and learn more about why we are the way we are and how to embrace the differences between us. And, like I tell my kids, different is good. And I just really am passionate about having a platform that speaks so honestly about the millennial and, Gen X and Gen Y journey of really trying to think deeply about parenting and working to be intentional and messing up a whole lot along the way, and there not really being a rule book for this. You're not alone if you're on that journey. It does feel like trying to put together a car as it's speeding down the interstate. It's messy. It's so messy, and you're going to feel like you're failing, but it's worth it. It's so freaking worth it. So, Christie Lazo is a Peruvian-Canadian podcaster and mother of one, living in Toronto, Canada. She's a digital marketing strategist by profession who, during her free time, creates digital content in English and Spanish. In 2018, Christie launched Vida with Christie, a blog later turned podcast influencing parents to live their best lives while raising aware and empowered children. Christie has also launched her podcast network, an inclusive community to empower and elevate the voices of Canadian female podcasters. Christie is a tea lover, beauty and makeup obsessed, an avid foodie, a travel enthusiast, and a mama. So, tune in to this episode to be able to see what it looks like 7 years in for a mom to be reclaiming her motherhood, tossing expectations to the side, and rethinking discipline and her relationship with her daughter in a whole new light, while still trying to hold together her family and blaze a trail of her own. Before we dive into this episode, I want to tell you a little bit more about what coaching with Wholeheartedly looks like, because I don't really go into that a whole lot on the podcast, and I want to give you at least a glimpse to see if it would be for you. So it's called Sanity and Solutions because you need both. Sandy makes strategies possible. But if you have 3 goals, these are the things we work on together. More patience, positive discipline tools to cultivate cooperation with your strong-willed child, and getting on the same page by writing a family business plan. These are the 3 main things that we work on. And I have a printed workbook I send you with tabbed sections for each one of those areas. One is the family business plan framework. The next is the cultivating cooperation guide. And the third is the triggers workbook to extend your patience. There's a bunch of other supplemental resources, as well as coaching notes, and an entire online portal of other supplemental trainings, a mini course on fostering healthy sibling rivalry, healthy sibling relationships, opposite of rivalry. Then we also have ongoing support. So the ongoing support looks like a shared app where you can get feedback and share stories and ask questions in between Zoom sessions to be able to get all of the tools that you need to make it all make sense when the ideas hit the road. So coaching entails, as a whole, 8 one-on-one hour Zoom sessions, the online portal that you have access to forever, the ongoing support through an app, through the coaching relationship over a 4-month period, and the over 100-page printed workbook mailed directly to your home to keep as a resource forever. One of my clients actually graduated, and she said that when we just moved last month, I donated all of our other parenting books because it's just too confusing to have all those other noisy, conflicting resources. Your workbook is the one thing that answers all of our questions. And I feel like that clarity is gold. You need so much peace of mind to be able to have patience, to be able to learn these new vocabulary and work it into your day, and to have each other's back and parent as a team. So that's what the process looks like. You start off with an initial consultation, we come up with an individualized plan, and then we work through that plan through each session while also diving deep into what is going to be the most effective use of our coaching time, which you set ahead of time and then I plan for so that we can dive deep into whatever is the biggest pain point for you in that 2-week period and make the most of our time together. So that's Sanity and Solutions Coaching. The first step to finding out if we are a good fit to work together is to schedule a free consultation call. You do that with the link in the show notes or by going to parentingwholeheartedly.com/coaching and then clicking apply now. I would love to be a part of your family's story in finding a whole new foundation and a transformation that allows you to feel confident that you have the relationship with your child that you want to have and you have the tools so that you can handle whatever they throw your way. And so I have the roadmap, I have the compass. We just need to find each other and work together, and I would be so honored to do that with you. So now that we're all up to speed, go ahead and schedule that call while you listen to this episode. Let's dive in. Welcome to Failing Motherhood. My name is Danielle Bettman, and on today's episode, we have Christie Lazo. Hey, Christie.
Hi, how are you, Danielle?
I am hanging in there.
Right? Mom life in a pandemic.
Right? 2 years in.
Yeah.
I don't know how to answer that question anymore.
Exactly, right? On my podcast, I've been doing episodes of like parenting in a pandemic, and then I was like, wait, is this like number 3? Is this number 4? I'm like, I don't even know what number I'm at anymore because I thought it was just gonna be like an one episode thing. Like that. Nope.
Yeah,
it keeps going.
It's just like a hot topic of the season. Oh, if like 2020 us could see us now.
Imagine. And all of us in 2019 thinking we were gonna live our best lives in 2020.
Yep. It was our year. Okay, so we just recorded actually together a couple weeks ago for your podcast. So we're just like picking up where we left off, but none of my listeners know who you are yet. So Go ahead and share with us who you are and who's in your family.
Sure. So I am Christie Lazo. I have a podcast called the Vida with Christie podcast, and it is truly just a reflection of my motherhood journey and all of the things that I have just reflected on, and I'm changing, updating, unlearning, learning as I navigate motherhood. And a lot of it, of course, has a lot to do with my culture. I am a first generation immigrant. I was born in Peru, and now I live in Toronto, Canada. And my parents, how I was brought up and how I'm doing things very differently with my daughter, right? So being a very strong advocate for anti-racism, decolonization, all of these things that I was never taught, or actually I was taught the wrong way, so that's the journey that I'm on now with my podcast. And, at home, I have, like I said, my daughter, my husband. We just added the cutest little puppy. She's an Aussie Doodle named Luna. So she is the breaking news of our home right now.
Congrats. So exciting.
Mm-hmm.
Luna. Oh,
yes.
Such a cute name.
Yes. Oh, yes. And then I should also add, this is another layer to, my family life is my dad lives with us, right? So my dad lives with us because, I share on my podcast. My mom passed away a few years ago from breast cancer. So, a lot of us, I think millennials, we're in this space where we're taking care of our kids, but taking care of our parents at the same time, right? So, yeah, that's also, I guess, another layer to my life story.
That is a multi-generational home. Yeah. Mm-hmm. So have you ever felt like you were failing motherhood?
Oh my goodness, yes. Yes. And I'll never forget the moment when, after maternity leave, I returned to work and I had my shiny new office. I started a brand new job. It was one of my dream jobs. Little did I know I was going to get to living my dream in this position at that time. But I sat there with my breast engorged and hurting and me crying because I couldn't believe that I had to be back at work. Because, I was leaving my daughter behind. And I live in Canada, so I had a whole year of maternity leave, right? But I feel like at the same time, that year made me that much more attached to my daughter. Like I mentioned, I was still nursing her, right? Yeah. So it was just so many emotions. And I also was quite fortunate that timing worked out perfectly, that my husband works, because he works in landscape construction, so his work is seasonal. So it means that during the winter, when I started work, he was able to stay home with my daughter for a few extra months. So at least I knew that he was, she was safe with her dad at home. But at the same time, I was without my child, and how could I be returning to work? How could I be putting my career first, right? So throughout this, for a few years, that trajectory, I felt, am I failing? Am I doing the wrong thing? Because I saw a lot of, friends, peers, community members, etc., staying home with their kids, being, work from home moms. But that wasn't a possibility for me because I also felt that I worked so hard to get where I was at in my career. So how could I put it to a full stop, you know. And before we started recording, I talked to you about, you know, my academic journey and how I got there. And it was such a struggle to get my degree. And, you know, so for me, I didn't want all that effort to be in vain either. So how could I juggle motherhood and putting myself first with my career trajectory?
Yeah. That is not an easy thing for anyone to wrestle with because it feels so contradicting. It feels like there's no right answer, and there is no right answer for each person.
Yeah.
But the guilt and the confusion and the indecision, oh, man.
Yeah.
You're not alone.
It breaks your heart a little bit, right? And like
it does.
Now I've gotten to the point where, yes, I still feel guilty. Like the guilt does not go away. My daughter's 7 now. The guilt does not go away, but I feel that, especially now in the pandemic where she's actually seen me physically at home at my computer working, and I've been able to walk her through some of my projects, share with her what I actually do during the day, because before she was like, Mommy works at a university, and what does she do? I don't know, you know? Now she kind of has a better idea of what I'm doing, and it's been really, really great because I feel like if I'm trying to raise a strong girl that's going to chase her dreams and is going to live her very best life, then I'm leading through example. Right? Her dream might be to be a work from home mom, and that's okay too, right? Because that is amazing. Like when, you know, believe it or not, like the times where before the pandemic, when I was working full-time, commuting, all that fun stuff, and I had to stay home with my daughter when she was sick, I was that much more exhausted from that full day at home than I was being able to kind of like shut off a little bit when I went to work.
Yeah.
Right? So that really taught me, like, I respect work from home moms so much because there's so much, and I only have one child too, right? Not multiples and whatnot. So yeah, I feel like whatever career she chooses, I know I'm leading through example because I'm teaching her that chasing her dreams and making them a reality and working hard towards them is a priority in her life.
That is so powerful. And as a fellow girl mom, that means so much to me too, because I knew that I had aspirations that were outside of motherhood, and they feel wrong, and you have to like fight with that selfishness feeling, or like what, you know, is best for me, and is that okay, and do I have permission, and all the things. But like, I really hope that I show them that I at least went after what I wanted, and they can unapologetically do the same.
Exactly.
Whatever that is.
That's exactly it, right? I feel that it's complex because as a mom, a lot of us, especially like culturally, we grew up like mom is the thing you do. Like once you become a mom, that's the thing. Like your kids are number one. But in my journey, I quickly learned that, you know, it's kind of like in the plane, when the masks drop, you have to put it on yourself first. You have to look out for yourself first. So am I a wholesome person? Am I taking care of myself? Am I, you know, living my life to the fullest outside of being a mom, right? Because I also don't want later in life for me to, you know, I can make taking care of my daughter full-time work, maybe, hopefully, but at the same time, am I going to have this regret later in life? You know, it's I left my career and I worked so hard to get there. And I think another layer to it is also, as an immigrant child, you're taught, we came to this country for you to have a better life. So you need to do. And for my parents, I had very high pressure expectations of you need to go to university. You need to get a good job. That's like the be all and end all for them, right? We did this for you. So I also had that added layer of how dare I not keep going with my career if my parents sacrificed so much for me.
Right.
Right? So it's lots of layers.
Yeah. You don't just like take a deep breath and that goes away.
Yeah, totally. Totally. It's, you know, it's these pressures. And of course, being a woman, right? Because this doesn't normally happen to the male role in a household, right? Like, and we've seen it with a pandemic, like how many women, mothers have left their jobs as a result of the pandemic.
Oh my gosh.
Right? Like
Millions.
the data is outstanding, like astronomical. Yeah, when you see how many women have had to leave the workforce to take care of their children because of the pandemic and childcare situation, right?
Yeah, it's the reality. There's nothing else to do. It hasn't even been a choice for a lot of families.
Yeah, exactly. So, and that's why I've also been advocating so hard for parents having daycare options, equitable daycare options during this pandemic, because for me, I've been lucky that I've been able to work from home. It has not been easy whatsoever while my child's learning and I'm working and my husband's physically at work, you know, but at the same time, I know I have it really good compared to some mothers who have to physically be at work, who takes care of their child, right? What happens?
Yeah.
So, yeah, I've been a big advocate for that piece because I feel like, you know, parents have had it. They're one of the demographics that have had it the hardest during this pandemic.
100%. Yeah. And it's so much deeper than the individual battle that we try to simplify it to be.
Yeah.
And, you know, there's so many layers to the systems that are failing and all of the way deeper ideologies that are the wrong premise entirely. So we can only even like scratch the surface of that topic, I feel like. But
totally.
It is worth saying because you're not the only one with that struggle right now. 100%. Hey, do you have my free Calm Big Emotions guide downloaded already? If not, now's the time. I just revamped it, made it all pretty so that you can understand the approach to take, what to say, and how to help your child calm down after and amid a tantrum or meltdown. This free guide covers needed perspective for the hardest moments, step-by-step explanation of how to implement my 5 steps to calm down, a printable to use of those 5 steps to calm down to put on your wall, super pretty, and helpful scripts to use in the moment. It has perspective for leading up to the meltdown and after the meltdown, and it is for you if you want to feel more confident in those moments, clear on what you're supposed to be doing, and help you gain more control over your composure in those moments as well. Completely free, ready for you to download at parentingwholeheartedly.com/emotions. Go ahead and grab that now. Back to the episode. One of the main reasons why I brought you on was because you are a huge advocate for conscious parenting and just being so transparent and honest about what that journey has looked like for you, especially with your unique lens, all the cultural aspects to that. And so when you shared with me some of like the topics that we could talk about, one of the things you wrote just like jumped out to me. So I'm going to read what you said, and then I just want you to like expand on what that means to you.
Yeah,
so
for sure.
You said, if I can heal so my daughter never has to, it's worth every effort.
Yes. I'm like,
what does that mean to you?
I'm having all these feelings just from that one line alone. Because there's so many things that have happened in my life, in everybody. I feel like in a lot of our lives, everybody's gone through stuff, right? However, I feel like a lot of the times we don't address it. We like put it in this deep, dark box within our heart and our soul. But little do we realize, especially when we become parents, it affects who we are as parents and it affects our children, right? So we have extreme cases of people saying, hey, I got hit and I turned out okay, to like even me feeling really anxious when there's a mess in my house, right? So there's like these two extremes where like both of them, you just want to like be like, are you okay though? Are you, because the reality is that a lot of the times it has nothing to do with your child, but everything to do with yourself.
Yeah.
Right? So in the past, I've raised my voice, right? Why did I raise my voice? It's because now I realize it's because I was triggered by how I was treated when I made a mess as a child. Not because my child is creatively living and playing and, like, it has nothing to do with her, right? And a lot of the times I feel like when we do this journey of trying to unlearn and reflect, we're taught, a lot of us are brought up of like, you need to respect your elders, you need to respect your family, you need to respect your parents above all. And this is so disrespectful to your parents for you to say that they didn't raise you right. But one thing that I always remind people that I have discussions with about this topic is your parents did everything they could based on what their knowledge, what their skills, what the access, resources, everything in between that they had. They did the best that they could, and that's excellent. But one of the reasons why my parents moved to Canada, for example, is to give me a better life. A better life doesn't just mean making more money because I have a nice job after going to university. A better life means my mental health, how I'm living my life, how I'm raising my kids, what is gonna become of my kids. That's a better life. Like, there's so much more to it, right? So as important as it is for me to continue pursuing my career and academically and successfully and all that for this better life, quote unquote, it also means that I need to be a better parent as well, right? So that's the journey I'm on. And it's hard because currently, like I said, I live with my dad. So it's caused a lot of difficult conversations of, from like, dad, when my daughter, like when my daughter Zoe, when she says no, whether you're tickling her, whether you're hugging her, whether you have the best intentions in the world, if she says no, you need to stop what you're doing at that moment because she is not consenting to what is happening. Right? That's like, that was a difficult situation with us, or even in our culture, like kissing, hugging when we say hi. My parent teaching my husband's parents that if she doesn't want a kiss, then we don't give her a kiss, or she doesn't have to give you a kiss. You can't force that on her.
Yeah.
Right? So that, and then as they grow, it's more conversations of like, even my dad making like certain comments, for example, like if two girls are kissing on TV and he's like, oh, why? And I'm like, Dad, we don't make those comments in front of my daughter. We don't do that. You may have your opinions, but you need to keep those to yourself because we are raising her differently. Because you don't know if, like me, she's going to be a queer woman. And I've had to live with those comments. That's why I never formally came out to my parents, because my dad made those comments. Yeah. Right? So
yeah,
I mentioned that to him, and that's basically how I kind of came out to him by saying like, hey, Dad, you can't make those because I grew up with that and I know how it affected me. Right? And then he like apologized and he felt all awkward and weird about it. But I was like, but now do you understand the severity of why, like, we're not doing this with my daughter? I don't want her to feel like she ever has to come out to me. I want her to just be. And know that I respect that, whoever she is. So it's those complexities of like, how do I do the reflection, do the hard work? And that means going to therapy. That doesn't mean just reading a self-help book and thinking you did better. It means going to therapy, doing really hard, messy work that's going to make you cry, your partner's going to be on board. If you have a partner, your partner's got to support, be on board. He has to deal with me being messy sometimes. Christmas, just passed, and I was just emotional and I was angry and I was lashing out a little bit and I broke down, and he was there for me. And it all came down to like, my mom isn't here. Right? Like, I feel like if I was a child, it would have been seen as like this tantrum and I would have been sent to my room. But as an adult, thank goodness my husband was there for me and he knew something's up. Because I was just like stressed. I was running around the house and he's like, whoa, hang on. Like, what's going on? And at the end of the day, it was, my mom's not here. And little did I know, like, it just snuck up on me, you know?
Yeah.
But yeah, it's messy work, but it is so, so important to do it in order for your kids to not have to go through those hurts and pains and challenges that sometimes we may not realize we're even experiencing, but we could see it in the way we're reacting a lot of the times. It's how we react.
Yeah.
That are like little red flags.
How did you discover the need to rethink, unlearn, become, basically start over? Like, was it when you were pregnant? Was it like when she was a baby? Like, what did that look like?
You know, I want to think there was a lot of pieces that were, of course, right away, like, you know, accepting who my child is no matter what. Like, when I was pregnant, like, you know, not even in the future, just, you know, babies are born sometimes with differences. So if that happens, I'm going to accept it. Like, I want to, you know, it started like that. But on the other hand, the piece of reclaiming my indigenous roots, for example, it came from my husband also being Peruvian and realizing how he's far more physically indigenous looking than I am. And so, and his last name and everything, it opened my eyes to, I never learned about this stuff. Nobody ever taught me. In fact, I was taught that our family is Spaniard. We're not that indigenous. Right? So it was this erasure of my strong roots. Like, why are we erasing this? But of course, it goes back to like elitism, classism, racism at the end of the day, right? So I started to really open up and say, hey, there's a lot here. And it's like a little bit of an identity crisis, I guess, of like, there's a lot here that I don't know about myself. And I'm starting to learn about that and showing my daughter about loving her brown skin and loving her dark hair, her dark eyes, because I remember being a 5-year-old girl and crying because I didn't have white skin and blonde hair. And I didn't want my daughter to go through that. Right?
Yeah.
So it's just these little things that I think happened to me as experiences in my life that said, what can I do so that my child doesn't have to experience these things as well? But how can I do it in a healthy and proactive way? Because I feel like when I was growing up, my parents were very strict with me. I wasn't allowed to do anything. Like, I didn't really go to like parties in high school. I didn't know sleepovers, nothing. But I feel like while my parents were trying really hard to protect me, it was very reactive. Like, no, you're not allowed to go anywhere, period. It wasn't of like, let's provide her with tools so that we can trust her and she can be safe.
Right.
Right? So
Same.
Yeah. So it's just, how can I do it differently for my daughter? Right. And of course, the partner piece is also difficult. It can be challenging because you have to make sure your partner's on the same page. And that took quite a bit of work, working with my husband, who at the beginning felt, I can't disrespect my parents. How dare I say they didn't raise me? Like, and I'm like, you know, you didn't turn out perfect. Like, you know, something must have happened. And so slowly he started to realize, I'm sounding like, every time I say that, like, he started to realize I'm sounding like, you know, Kylie Jenner when she's like, oh, and then I realized things in 2018. But it's just what I thought of. But he started to realize that, like, yes, I am, you know, he would say, for example, I'm like, sometimes you talk really rough. And he would say, oh, well, I was brought up around boys. Okay, well, now you're not around boys. You have a wife, you have a daughter. And how I would make him really reflect. So, for example, I would say, when your daughter grows up, and let's say she has a friend or a male partner, do you want somebody to talk to her like that? Would you be okay with that? And if his excuse was, I grew up around boys, would you still be okay with that? So I really caused him, like, and I would leave it there. I wouldn't make him answer me. I wouldn't, like, put him on the spot, and I would just leave it there. And I could just like see the gears turning in his head, you know?
Yes.
And slowly
That's
he
so
started
healthy,
to come
though.
around. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah, it really does take making sense of your own upbringing. And most of us haven't done that work until we're faced with it, literally face to face with our own kid, and have those choices laid out for us. And we have to think about, okay, when I was in this position, how did I feel as a kid?
Yeah.
Or what do I feel like, has stuck with me, good or bad? And where do I feel like that came from? And, how is my relationship with my parents now? And do I have the relationship I want to have with my child when they're a teenager with my parents? Why or why not? Like the more you make sense of your childhood, the more you can come into your parenting decisions with an educated reasoning and with some like logic and some perspective that gives you some clarity and some confidence. But it is an evolution. It's a journey.
Yeah. And I think the most important thing is to start as early as possible. So that's where the honesty piece with my daughter comes in to play, because I don't think it'll ever, and it's not a light switch of when she's a teenager, all of a sudden she's going to trust me and come to me with these things and share with me, and I'm going to be the cool mom. Like, no. That starts like as early as possible, where you create a safe space for your child to trust you and know that they can come to you. So that's another thing that was a learning curve for me, right? Of my daughter coming to me and saying, let's say, for example, I painted on the wall. Even though I hate that there's paint on the wall, do I lash out at her? Or do I take a deep breath, control my own feelings? Because if I'm teaching her to do that, then I better know how to do that. Control my own feelings and, make it a safe space for her. And so that she knows that when she comes to me, I'm not going to lash out, that we're going to try to work together to clean it together, whatever it is, right? Like, she knows how to use a magic eraser because it's been like, okay, well, how do we fix this? And she was all about the Mr. Clean magic eraser for a little while. And like when she was like 4 or 5 years old, she was like, Mommy, I need Mr. Clean, she would say.
Thank goodness for Mr. Clean.
Yeah, because it was just like, if you like made it like a mess or whatever, if you got some marker on the wall, whatever it is, like, okay, how do we fix it? We fix it, But yeah, it's hard. It's hard because there's times where in the middle of like her having a tantrum or something, I've had to just say, I love you, but Mommy just needs 5 seconds. I will be right back. And I need to walk away, gather myself, take a deep breath so I don't lash out, raise my voice, make it worse, because you're only escalating the situation when you're doing that. But that's what I was brought up on. Therefore, it's so triggering for me. It makes me so anxious, and it just like, it's just this feeling in my soul. Like, I can't even describe it, right?
Right. It's not a choice. It's not a conscious, aware decision. It is so much deeper. Because it's how you were wired. It's how you were conditioned. It's how you were treated over an extended period of time that creates your brain chemistry and like the neurological connections of like how you perceive a behavior and the lens that you view something. And it's so deep. So thinking that you can just, again, flip a switch to override that and do something different is very much discounting the work it takes.
Yeah, it's hard. It's hard and it's challenging. And it's, like I said, it's dirty, dirty work. But it's so important. It's one of those things where it's a hard climb, but the peak, like the vision over that peak is so beautiful when you see your full grown, like healthy, aware, empowered, strong child. That's incredible.
Yes.
That's incredible. Like, I want to be the parent where my child can like grow up and come home and know it's a safe space and like not be dreading it or like being like, oh my God, that like I have to prepare myself to go to my parents' house. Because I hear that too often from like my friends my age, and like it's difficult. Like, I don't want that for my child. So I know I need to start working on that right now, because I'm not going to be able to flip a switch later.
Right. Oh yeah. Like, even just that thought of I want her to know that she's excited to come for Christmas and not dreading that time with our family. Like, that makes me tear up because that's my reality. And that's exactly the trajectory I want to change. And when I see it in real time, I see some of those benefits and outcomes come to fruition where they do trust me and come to me with things, or they are wanting to spend time together, or they're using like these coping mechanisms I've been trying to teach them for 8 years, right? And you see those payoffs. It's gold. And then there's still like a symptom where you can be jealous of your own kid.
Yes, I've read about that.
Because they're getting what you didn't. Mm-hmm. Have you ever felt that way?
You know what? I haven't felt that way, believe it or not. But I've read about it, and yeah, it's tough. And actually, one of the things that comes to mind is Christmas is a big one for our family, because my husband is like, "Why do you get her all these gifts?" I feel now growing up, my parents got me a lot of gifts and bought me really nice things to make up for some of the stuff they did. Right? Like, their gifting was their way of like, oh, let me buy you this and it'll be okay. Like, you know, so we grew up with a lot of like, I guess, material privilege. And so my husband now, he's like, why do you get our daughter like all these gifts for Christmas? Like, my daughter had a unnecessary amount of gifts this year. But I was like, oh, but it's the pandemic and her like year has been so hard, and like, let me get her these things that she likes. And I kind of checked myself and I was like, I'm kind of like doing the same thing in a weird way of like what my parents did, like going overboard with gifts. And, you know, and this year she was into Rainbow High dolls. So I was like trying to go above and beyond to like get her the whole collection of like the first season. And then I was like, wait a second, like, this is not necessary. Like, I had to really check myself, you know, where my husband is like, I only got one gift. That was it. Like, I didn't even have Santa Claus. Like, it was just one gift. And sometimes I even had to share it with my siblings, you know? So it's like seeing that difference or seeing that repetition with your own child. And I think that where that may come in is during her teen years. You know, feeling of like, why was I not treated this way?
Yeah.
Right? And like her teen years scare me a little bit because I'm like, you know, there's so many more, I guess, dangerous things that can happen. So different even. Exactly. However, yeah, it scares me a little bit, but I feel like when I see her actually going to prom and not being scared to get in trouble, because that was like almost her like one of maybe like a handful of events that she was able to go to with her friends, like, you know, like I think that, yeah, but it's my way of doing it is like trying to make it like the super nicest thing. Like, knowing me, I'll probably buy her like the nicest dress ever because like I want to make it so special for her because I didn't get to live that myself. Like, mind you, like, you know, I had a nice dress for prom and everything, but it was like this like situation of like, I felt so untrusted to go to my own prom. And my parents really like minimize what a big deal it really is for a high school student to attend prom. Yeah. Right? Like, I didn't have the experience that I would have loved to have or my friends had, you know? Yeah. So, yeah, I think I'm doing it in a really odd way where I'm just like, I want to make my daughter have the best experience.
Yeah. Because it's out of those pure intentions. It's out of, I want better for you, and if I can provide it, then let's do it. Exactly. You know, like, no box are left unchecked.
Exactly, yeah.
And that's not bad in and of itself, but it's good to check in and see where those motives are coming from.
No, 100%. I think everything, you know, you have to be intentional about parenting. I think, you know, that's like the conscious piece, being intentional about how you're parenting, what practices, rituals, etc. like you're passing on to your child, practicing yourself, just because there is an outcome to everything that you do as a parent. Like, no pressure, you know?
Right?
But there is an outcome to so much that you do. So speaking actually of pressure, one of the things that I've been working on with my daughter recently is where she feels sometimes she's like, Mommy, you put pressure on me. And she's come to me, openly spoken to me about that. And, you know, having a conversation with like my husband and my therapist about it, it comes from a place of myself experiencing so much pressure, right? Growing up, I think it's that one piece of like being, you know, of the eldest daughter in like an immigrant family, like, and not only that's like the eldest cousin too, where all your other cousins and your aunts and your uncles are watching you, right? So yeah, so it's a lot of weight, and I had so much pressure on me that I sometimes don't yet know that maybe a comment or something as simple as like when she was learning how to ride her bike last year, for example, you can do it, come on, you can do it, you can do it. She felt pressure from that. And I thought I was like cheering her on and I was being so positive and, you know, empowering, but to her it was pressure. But to me, you know, so I really had to listen to her and recognize that my intention may be one thing, but the way she's receiving that message is different. And that matters a little bit more.
Oh, that's huge.
Right? So it's checking myself. And I remember telling my husband, like, she was upset and she was like crying at my husband. And I was like, but I'm not doing anything wrong. I'm just telling her. He's like, yeah, but she feels pressure from that. And then I started to really reflect on my upbringing and what that meant with my achievements and stuff. And I realized that I was told you have to do this, not you can do it. You know what I mean? Like, it wasn't like empowering. Yeah. It was expected of me, not like, let me encourage you. You know, it was like, this is what you have to do. So I'm like, am I maybe overcompensating with my daughter by trying to be extra encouraging, but to the point where I'm actually pressuring her?
Yeah. No. Like, you're so capable. So do it.
Yeah. You know, so it's like, it's, you know, it's big weight. It's big weight. Yeah. And we talked about that even before the recording, right? You brought up Encanto and right away, like, my eyes started to fill with tears because I was like, I cannot watch that movie with dry eyes because, like, I feel like the more I watch it, the more I read into it. And it's just, it's a story, not only my story, but it's a story for so many of us, right?
It is like Millennial Therapy by Lin-Manuel Miranda.
100%. Like, everybody was expecting, like, yay, a Colombian movie, because that's how they pitched it, right? So I'm like, okay, that's exciting, yay. And then it just got, like, you know, am I allowed to swear? Because really, like, shit got real. Yeah. Yes. That's, like, the best way I could say it.
Yes. That, like, Luisa's character with the song, the Pressure song.
Gosh,
like,
yeah. On TikTok, there's these amazing people just sharing their stories, their videos. And, you know, I've gone down, like, the TikTok Encanto black hole of, like, there's so many people just playing that song and feeling it so deep in their hearts. And you feel like, you know, it goes back to that healing piece. Like, you know, there's so many of us that need to heal from that are living that every day, that pressure, no mistakes. You cannot make a mistake. You know, yes. Like, I shared with you that, like, I experienced a lot of gatekeeping around accessing higher ed, university in particular. And that was a big piece, like, no mistakes. And then I remember, like, my last year of university experiencing anxiety from, like, making sure I got the job right out of university, like, no mistakes, right? Like, there's so much that rides on our shoulders. And the added layer for me currently is keeping my family going together as my mom would have, because she's not here anymore.
Oof.
Right?
That's heavy.
And I have my brother and my dad, and because we don't have a lot of family here in Canada, it's basically just us and, like, a few other family members, but our close circle is us, right? And keeping us together and everything, and realizing that I don't have to carry their weight. I promised my mom, the last conversation I had with her was that I would take care of them. But I've learned, it's been 4 years since she passed, and I've learned that taking care of them does not mean carrying their weight.
Ooh.
Right? And like, that's the character, exactly. Like, she's holding the world on her shoulders. And it was, it was 2018 where I literally like just got to the point where I could not anymore. Like, I was not in an okay place because I was trying to carry everyone's weight. I was trying to be the mediator for everyone. I was trying to, you know, make all these things happen that I thought my mom would do. And I was trying to like kind of take her place, but now realizing that I'm not my mom. I can't be my mom. But at the same time, as a mother, remothering myself because my mom's not here, and also mothering myself. You know what I mean? Like, it's just weight. It's weight.
Yeah.
Right? So that's also coincidentally when I started the podcast. I started originally in 2018 and I started doing all of this reflection. And I said, I need to start living for me. I need to just, because my mom, I love her so much. She was incredible in so many ways, but she was a lot of that pressure that I was talking about. Right? So without her being present and physically like pressuring me, physically present to pressure me anymore, I said, I turned 30 and I was like, that's it. I'm living my own life. I'm living for me now. I'm not going to live for her expectations anymore. You know, and I know that she looks down on me now, and I know she's incredibly proud of the person I've become. And I feel that these deep conversations I have with my husband all the time about this, it's like, I feel that even like with her passing away, little did she know that maybe she should have done that same thing too. Right? Lived for herself, shed away those expectations, shed away so much weight that she too carried on that maybe never talked about, you know, that now I'm a mother. I know what it's like. Like, so I feel like now she's looking down on me and she's not upset or anything. She's in fact proud of me because I've done something that she probably wished she could have done in her lifetime.
Yes. 100%. Because that pressure is not there out of ill will and evil. It is there out of sheer love and responsibility and fear of wanting the best for your child. And I think that that's how we can turn around and have compassion if our childhood wasn't healthy in a lot of ways, or if we didn't get our needs met as a kid, or if we look at our parents and say, that wasn't what I needed. We can still say, yes, they were doing the best they could with what they had, and they were doing it out of love, which just still doesn't mean that we, you know, excuse every behavior, but it shows how much we need to reflect on our choices as a parent, because if we just blanket everything with, well, it's out of love, it's still not going to be perceived in the way that's going to create the healthiest self-image and confidence and all these things that we want for our kids. We want the world for our kids, and then sometimes we put the pressure of the world on our kids because we want the world for them. And it almost creates like a really weird self-fulfilling prophecy because we're passing down that fear and we're projecting, you know, what we wish we had, or because of our own failures, we need to make sure our kids do right. And then that just spirals from generation to generation until someone says, hey, let's look at this actually under a microscope for a second and see where we went wrong.
Yeah, I
think like see if there's anything we can do.
A perfect example of that is like we often see child stars in the media and we are like, oh my God, what a mess they are. But then if you stop and think and look about their childhood, so Britney Spears, Lindsay Lohan, like the pressure that they've had as a kids, because they've literally they were born and raised to live the dreams of their parents. Like, and years later, We're like, haha, look at them. And no, they're not okay. It's nothing to laugh about.
They're
It's
not okay.
serious. This is serious. And like, of course, that's an extreme, but that's like a mainstream media example that we all recognize. Macaulay Culkin, etc. Right? Like now he's like living his best life. Like, but it took him so many years to get there. Right. And so much work, So those are like the mainstream media examples that I think we can all identify with. And of course, to our kids, it may not happen to that degree, but it still happens. And even though, yes, it's out of love, I have to kind of channel, I guess, my inner philosopher and say, what is love to me? What is the love that I want to be given? What is the love I want to be giving, to my child? Like, I a lot of the times put myself in my daughter's shoes. If I was her, would I want to be treated that way? And that's how I check my husband sometimes too. Because sometimes, let's say, I don't know, she's really like energetic and fidgety. So a lot of the times, like, she'll be sitting at dinner, but to tell you a story, she'll get up from your chair and come to your chair. And I'm like, I'm right beside you. Like, you could have just like talked to me. Like, and my husband will always be like, sit down. And I'm like, okay. But I'm like, listen, if you were to get up to like grab a napkin, grab ketchup or whatever, because that is your need at the time, her need is to speak to me or to speak to you. But I'm like, if you got up and somebody was like, sit down, would you not get annoyed as hell like, with them? Or what? Like, how would you feel if somebody treated you or said that to you, And it's really like checked him of like, you're right. Like, I wouldn't appreciate it now. Like, why are we, talking this way to my child and whatnot? And like, you do it out of love because he's like, I don't want her to like choke on her food, or I don't want her. And of course, it's out of love.
They have manners.
Yes.
Be able to handle a restaurant or
how are we approaching this love? Because there is toxic love too, right? Like there is healthy love.
Oh yeah.
So what is love to us, and how are we really approaching it, right? Because there's a lot of us that were hit as children. Our parents loved us, right? And some kids were told, oh, I do this because I love you. But then later in life, you find yourself in an abusive relationship wondering why the hell and how you got there. Yeah. Right? So I don't want that for my child. Like, so do I want to keep repeating these cycles?
Right. That was one of the things I was going to bring up. Like, is Chancla culture part of Peruvian culture?
Yeah, Chancla culture is really like Latin American culture, right? We often tie it to Mexican culture because, like for us, it's like a sandalia, like it's a different name but at the end of the day, it's the same action, like it's a chancleta, like it's the same action.
And for those that aren't familiar,
listen. Okay, so what we I guess know as chancla culture is just hitting your kids as a behavioral technique, right? Like, I'm gonna teach my child to behave by hitting them. And my big thing is, as a child, I was hit by my dad, my mom once. And the wild thing is I could say my mom once because I've never forgotten it. I know the exact moment. I know exactly what I said. I know exactly what happened. Like, those moments are so engraved in my mind because it was trauma, right? Like, I got sent to my room or I got hit. My dad would come to me after and say, I'm so sorry I did that, but I love you so much. So you hit me. And then like, what? Like, that makes no sense. Why would you hit me and then say you love me? Like, but that's the example that I said. You end up in an abusive relationship one day and you don't know how the hell you got there, because I lived that in my early 20s. I was in a very, very dangerous abusive relationship because I thought that this person loved me even though they treated me like the worst thing on earth. Right?
That's the reality.
I see that now. I see how I ended up in that relationship. Right? And once again, it's like, I don't want to say, Dad, this is all your fault, but things happen as a result of your actions. without you even realizing that it would ever get there, right? Like,
right, because it alters your brain chemistry as a little kid.
Exactly. And I feel that also I'm not teaching my kid anything. Like, all like, to date and age, that is something that I'm still learning to heal when it comes to my dad. Like, I love my dad. I respect him so much. We have a good relationship, but I think that we would have a better relationship if he had not hit me. Because that is still something I hold in my heart that I don't think I'll ever be able to, like, fully forget. I've forgiven him because he has apologized and said that he now knows that he shouldn't have done that. But then at the same time, I also realize that he is also he is somebody who did not break his cycle, because that was also done to him. Right? So I'm seeing as an example right away of why it's so important for me to break those cycles with my daughter. Because my dad did not know any better, because that is what was done to him. Like, with a belt. Not even with a hand, like with a belt. So he did not break those cycles, and therefore he did that to me. Funny enough, though, I think it's like within Latin American culture, a lot of people understand this, or maybe even like I said, Arab Indian culture. This didn't happen to my brother. It happened to me as a daughter, as a girl. My brother, really? So patriarchal cultures, right? You treat the son differently. The son is just treated very, very differently, and he is like a gift from God and all the holy angels. And, you know, daughters are just different. They're treated differently, right? So even the thing of, like, you know, we have a daughter, and like a lot of people would come to us where I've like set people straight, where like we're having one and we're done. We're good. We're happy as a family, period. But for a long time, people would come to us and be like, oh, so are you going to try to have a little boy? Because it's like this big thing, right? Of like, oh, are you trying for a boy? Like, why? First of all, like, for me, like, to me, gender is fluid. Like, it's not like boy, girl, like, they are who they are. They're humans at the end of the day, you know? And the funny, like, my favorite joke that I that I heard one day, and I don't remember where it was, but it was like, why are so many people obsessed with having a boy and a girl? Like, are we trying to breed them? So that is like the best.
For real though.
Yeah. So that was like the best thing, and I used it on people. I used it on people for a while, and I was like, why? I'm like, are we gonna breed them? Like, what's the plan? And people be like, oh my God. Like, I even told that to my grandma. I was like, really? You know, so
oh my God.
Yeah, even like
I'm
these
not gonna
old
forget
ideas. Yeah, it was the best.
Yeah.
These old ideas of like, not even you have to have multiple kids. Like my dad, right, the other day. So now we have 2 dogs, and we're taking care of my brother's dog. So we have 3 dogs in the house. So he goes to me, oh my God, 3 dogs is so many dogs. I'm like, Dad, whatever, you know what? Like, it's an adventure. Like, it is what it is. We love these dogs. We're having so much fun. And so I was like, Dad, isn't it funny how you told me that me having a 1-child family was not a whole family? That's not enough of a family, you told me. And then I'm like, now I have 4 children. I have my daughter and my 3 dogs. They are all my children. And then he's like, no, it's not the same. And I'm just like, these old ideas that make no sense. They come from like no foundation. But then I read an article the other day that said the Pope. So this is like the thing, like religion also plays such a role in this. The Pope made an announcement. He said, millennials need to have more children and not so many pets. Yeah, he said millennials have too many pets. Like, my feedback to that is like, sir, if you sell some of your gold in your home and offer to like social assistance support us for mortgage, student loan, daycares, I'm sure we'd love to have more kids. But until then, my dog is doing perfectly fine. Like, you know, like,
for real though.
What? Like, it's these old school ideas, right? And like I also told my husband, right, because I'm so sassy, like through and through, and this is what you hear on my podcast. But like I told my husband, I was like, it's because, and I'm like, I'm Catholic, and people are gonna hate me for saying this, but I told my husband, I was like, it's because the Catholic Church, unfortunately, is becoming outdated. And I'm like, the reality is they don't want us having pets because they can't colonize our pets. like, what are they gonna do?
Yeah.
Like, because, yeah, like, you know, I grew up Catholic and all that stuff, but that's another thing I reflect on. That's another thing I critically think through, you know, because it comes with all of these wild ideas, you know, of like, my dad, you know, making these comments that I had to say, Dad, those are homophobic comments. You can't make those comments. What do you mean I'm not homophobic? Well, Dad, what you're saying is homophobic. You know, like, so him not even realizing maybe it was just like simple ignorance, right? But I called him out on it, and I call people out, and I don't have an issue with it. and yeah, like, I feel like it needs to be done. And that's also part of my healing as an adult, having that little bit of power that as a child I didn't have to say those things and have those conversations. Right? So, yeah, it's a journey.
There's so many things that we were just handed, you know, that are just handed down from generation to generation, that are cultural expectations, religious expectations, society expectations. And, you know, like, you have to look at the tool and say, who's this serving? Yeah. Who's benefiting off of me following this expectation? Exactly. It's usually not me or my kids.
And that big conversation, I had a big conversation with my dad of like, he was talking to my daughter about like obedience one day and that. And I had to have like a whole conversation. Like, we are literally going above and beyond to not teach our daughter about obedience. My husband and I do not believe in obedience. We are not teaching her to be an obedient child. Because I know how it affected me. My husband knows how it affected him, of having to sit down and be quiet, not speak until you're spoken to, etc., 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 as a child. Right? So I want my daughter to be outspoken. I want her, if something is not right, if she is not feeling safe, whatever it is in a space, I want her to be able to speak up. Right? I remember when I was little, my dad would make me, we visited a family member, and he would make me like, oh, you have to go kiss them on the cheek. And I remember hating that, because this particular family member, as a small child, made me feel icky. And I feel like you need to believe your child. That is for a reason. And I did not like getting close to this family member. Right? Yeah. So with my daughter, like, I'm not teaching her to be obedient when somebody says, oh, you have to go say hi and kiss them or whatever on the cheek. Like, I'm teaching her to no consent. First of all, I'm teaching her consent culture. That consent, she has power over her body to say no, and nobody can make her do otherwise. But also, the obedience can sometimes be dangerous. Right? Because how many times have we heard of women being raped because they were just obedient in a situation they should have been walking away from or running away from? Right? Right. So it's something that seems so small right now when they're children, but as you grow into your teen years, adulthood, it can quickly snowball into something bigger. So that's why I'm a strong advocate, and I educate parents to make, you know, these changes today, now that your kids are smaller and younger.
Because we all don't love tantrums.
Yeah.
I mean, no. Like, it's genuinely so much easier to have a child that just says, yes, Mom, thank you, Mom. You know, and is quiet. However, if you play out the trajectory of that, you're not going to like the outcome. And that's why I start with all my new coaching clients, and we rate the outcome first that we're looking for. Then we plan the trajectory to get there, because it's likely not the first impression of, you know, how you're throwing spaghetti at a wall. It's not the road to the success that you're looking for your child is not a first time obedient speak when spoken to child.
Yeah, exactly.
It's not.
Exactly. So...
But, like, what do you do to get them to get their shoes on without, like, you know, yelling and spanking and some of these things, these tools? The only way that you were treated, the only way you know, that's the work. That's figuring out, how do I communicate clearly, manage my own emotions, deal with conflict, like, create strong boundaries. It's things we were never taught.
We are learning along with them. And it's not just about, like, learning 100%. To be a parent. It's just learning to human. Really. Like, you know? Literally learning to human in a healthy way, because a lot of us don't know how to control our emotions. You know, especially when you have, you know, in certain spaces, little boys are taught that they need to be rough. They need to hide their feelings. They need to... And it's just, they grow up to be men who don't know how to control their emotions, and they lash out in very dangerous ways.
Or just simply very uncomfortable with anyone else's display of emotion.
Exactly. That's exactly it. So how do we teach our kids and teach ourselves to be better, you know? And it's like, it's a journey together, and it's okay to be honest with your child and say, I'm sorry, I'm still learning. I'm trying my best. You know, I have that conversation with my daughter when I make mistakes. You know, and I'm very conscious about just not saying, I'm sorry, I love you. But I am learning. This is what I'm struggling with. And this is what I'm trying to do. Does that work for you? Is that okay with you? Would this help you? You know, and also because... we are a whole family. She's her own whole human. I don't see it as like, I'm her mom and she's some sub-family member. No, she's a whole family member, you know? So how do I also include her in what is happening in our home, in the decisions that are being made? And, like, you know, like, with it, I'm not going to be like, Zoe, what do you think of the budget of this renovation? You know what I mean? Like, you know, but like within reason, you know, if it impacts her in a way. So, you know, from things that, like, from things of, like, you know, if you make a mistake in the future, how would it be best that Daddy and I address it? Do you have any suggestions? Right? To, like, I don't know, do you want, like, even things that, like, do you want this shelf here? Do you want it over there? Like, making them feel included in the household. And I think that is so important for children, right? At their age level, right? And that teaches them so much. Beyond, you know, we often think of, like, lessons as, like, okay, when they get in trouble, like I said, I got sent to my room or I got hit. Like, that didn't teach me anything. But there's there's so many opportunities to also teach them other aspects of life and
actual
exactly. It's being, like, really humble with your kids and letting them know that you're also human, that you're not perfect. Like, there's no need for them to ever think you're perfect. It's really so unnecessary, you know, and just being like truthful with them, being honest with them so that they're able to also feel human through that, to know that when they make mistakes, it's not because they failed or really messed up, but rather because they're human and mistakes happen and it's okay.
Yes. Mistakes are opportunities to learn is one of, like, the 7 pillars of positive discipline.
Yeah.
But it's because, like, how your parents view mistakes becomes a part of you and how you see yourself and how you treat others based on when they make a mistake to you. And being able to have self-compassion and grace for others stems from that entire belief system that we install in our kids.
That's right. And, like,
it's a big deal.
And, like, I've had conversations with my mom friends, actually. I'm like, you know, when your child throws a tantrum, when they're not feeling their best and they're having a lot of big feelings, we often, like, the go-to is, like, stop doing that. But if our girlfriend is having big feelings, we are the first ones over with a bottle of wine and, like, some takeout. What can I do for you? How can I help? Like, you know what I mean? So it's like, so then why are we not giving our kids the same treatment, compassion? Like, you know, why do we treat kids so differently, right? And of course, like, when you read into childism and why those things happen, then it kind of really opens your eyes, right? Often you think like, oh, that's such a big word, like racism, you know, it's such a big word, like let's not use it. But we all practice childism without even noticing it because we've all been conditioned in this way. Our society is just conditioned in this way.
Yeah, we don't question it. Yeah, but it's an injustice. It's this form of oppression.
Yeah, exactly. So there's, you know, us raising incredible kids that are going to hopefully, you know, not only advocate for themselves, but I also think of like my daughter, they have their own little worlds at school that we know nothing about, really. You know, my daughter comes and shares with me like so-and-so like held hands with so-and-so on the schoolyard. And I'm like, wow, they have like their own like worlds. And like through my lessons, I also hope my daughter's also making a difference to another child, you know, in her schoolyard, you know, like she told me like there's a new kid in her class and she was so excited about that, you know, and I was like, okay, how are we making them feel welcome? Like, tell me about them, you know, like it's just, I hope that she is learning so much of what we're doing at home, how I am, and also practicing and advocating at school too, right? Like if she sees something's not okay, I hope she's the one to put up her hand and say, hey, this isn't okay, you know? And I always like sometimes joke, like I dare, because I experienced this as a kid, right? Like I dare a teacher to call me and have an issue with my daughter advocating something like good for someone, you know? Like I dare them to because they're really gonna get a lecture and like, you know? But fortunately it hasn't happened because she's had wonderful teachers and, you know, but yeah, I want my daughter to speak up. Like I was the kid that was labeled as disruptive because I would put up my hand and ask questions, right? I would ask tough questions that, yes, maybe disrupted the teacher's lessons because maybe at the time she didn't have the answer to them. But it's something as simple as saying, like, hey, let me look that up and get back to you. Not you're disrupting the class. Like there's no need to feel embarrassed about those things, right? Yeah. Same with like my daughter saying, Mommy, like, how do you, like, let's say she goes, how do you say this in French? And like, I don't speak perfect French. I can get by, but sometimes there's words that I don't know. And we are so lucky in this day and age that Google is literally just a few finger taps away or Alexa's right there. Yeah. And we can just say, how do you do this? How do you do that? How do you say this? Like, tell me more about this. So it's learning together too, right? It's opportunities. That also humbles you to your children of, hey, I don't know. Let's find out together. Yes. The other day we watched YouTube videos about cranberry harvesting because she asked me how cranberry juice is made.
Who knows things about cranberry harvesting, right?
You know, and it's opportunities to learn together. And it's also a way to use digital social media in a positive way. Yeah.
Totally. It's a tool. Yeah. No, I love those practical examples of like what that looks like to you to really embrace her curiosity and to, you know, help her see the value in that part of her personality and not crush that spirit that is there, that is going to be such an asset to use later on, especially for how she creates change and treats people. And like one small example I'll share, and then we can probably need to wrap this up. I could talk forever though. Like I'm just so passionate about it. And so are you. When I apologize to my oldest daughter because I've been short, because I, you know, lose my patience, I'll come say like, I'm so sorry for treating you that way. And I'll give her a reason. I'll say like, I'm just feeling really tired, or I have a headache, or there's like something else. It's not about you. And then she'll say, it's okay. And I correct her and I say, no, it's not okay for anyone to treat you that way. But you can say, I forgive you.
Yes.
And I just feel like that distinction, like I'm really passionate about, because I don't want her to just accept any treatment. And as long as someone apologizes, then it's still like she's reading into it that it's somehow her fault.
I love that.
Like, yes, it's not.
I love that. I love that so much. And I also, same thing, I've done it, and I tell my daughter, even like sometimes even with my husband, you know, discussions happen. And my daughter, like a lot of the times, parents, we try to hide those things from our children. But in my research among that, I found that sometimes, like, it's good for your children to see the resolution piece of, like, how, you know, we're figuring it out, we're talking about it, because disagreements happen. You're two whole different people living in a house together, like trying to live together, have kids, everything, right? Disagreements happen. So it's like for children to see that, right? And then sometimes, you know, let's say I say to my husband, oh, you said this and I didn't like that, and he'll say like, I'm sorry. And same, you know, like I taught my daughter, like, it's not okay. I accept your apology, but like, it's not okay for you to do that again. Like, you know,
right.
And yeah.
A true apology is choosing differently next time, or fixing the problem or repairing the relationship.
I love that, just because, it teaches them to accept that. And I think, like, it's funny because me being Canadian, it plays into this, like, oh, Canadians are so nice, we're always apologizing. Canadians are always saying sorry and whatnot, but, like, you know, yes, you can be the nicest, be the nicest Canadian in the world no matter where you're from. Play it like a Canadian. But at the end of the day, yeah, like, if it's not okay, it's not okay. And it's perfectly okay to not be polite about it. And that's, I think, the part also about, like, for her not to always be obedient, which also ties into not always being polite. If somebody is being awful, you don't have to sit there and take it, and you don't have to be polite about it all the time.
Yes. Oh my, one more example. So my husband and I were just talking last night about this. He read some joke about how it's like, I care so much about what the waiter thinks of me, I will throw everyone at the table under the bus so that they think that, like, I'm a good person, like, by saying, like, oh, I'm so sorry about them, you know, and just being so self-conscious about, like, if someone asks for something special or, like, takes forever or whatever, like, you're so self-conscious of, like, I need to cater to the feelings of this complete stranger. And we're just, like, sitting here thinking, why? Why do I feel so compelled to be so incredibly worried about what this stranger thinks of me, which they don't care. They are going to go home and never remember I existed.
Yeah, totally.
Like, I am a blip on their radar. But, like, the people that mean the most to me, my kids and my husband, like, I will be so abrasive or harsh or rude to just so that they stay polite in that one, like, moment of time. And yes, there is a value to absolutely learning that your actions has consequences and that, you know, there's manners in a society. However, those are taught by being modeled, and I want my kids to still have the intuition of, like, knowing that this is why I do it, and it's coming from a very internal place, that it's driven by, you know, who they are as a person, rather than it's because of I care about what this waiter thinks about me. Like, my intuition as a kid was absolutely crushed and driven out for the most part by religion, and I absolutely want to do that differently because I want my kids to turn inward. I want them to think about why they do what they do, and that it's driven by knowing that I listen to my body, I trust myself, I can make decisions and feel good about it, because I don't still. And I don't feel like that's okay. Like, it's this very small, silly 100%. Thing to be like, oh, you know, I'm so sorry about all these people at the table to this waiter. But it represents such a bigger thing that we need to, like, look into a little bit.
Yeah, especially when you tie it into religion, you know, like, I think the, like, inside joke at every church is always, like, the godliest person at the church is not really that nice outside of church. Like,
oh yeah, like, they're yelling at their family right until they got in the door.
Exactly, you know, like, it's this just because that's just unfortunately the reality of it, and that's the conditioning that we've had from having religion without us even realizing plays such a heavy role within our everyday society, particularly, you know, Christianity. Catholicism falls under that, right? Yeah, it just plays such a strong role that there's so many things that we don't realize happen. And these are conversations having my daughter, like, she attends a Catholic school, but I also have really good conversations with her about, like, you know, one day, Mommy, why don't we go to church? And, you know, I had to have a conversation with her of, like, going to church doesn't make us good Catholics. It doesn't make us good humans. It's who we are every single day, living through our faith, what we grew up with, that makes us good people. You know, like, I channel, like, I always say, like, when it comes to religion, I'm always like, really, truly, what would Jesus do? Right? Like, Jesus wouldn't be trying to go to church every Sunday. He'd be like, I have people to help over here. Like, you know?
Yeah.
So, yeah, like, really, when you look at it that way, you know, I often, like, rebel when it comes to my religion and whatnot, because there's so many aspects of it that do, like, hurt people. But at the same time, when it comes to faith in itself, put aside, you know, the organization of religion, I think, there's a lot of value of it, of, like, you know, when you talk about Jesus helping people regardless, you know, that's beautiful. And that's how I want to live. I want to know that I helped this person and that made me a good human, rather than having the, like, business side of church play a role in my life, you know?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that's another topic.
Oh my gosh, totally. That's another episode.
I used to work for a church. I mean, there's a lot of history there, so
that's another episode.
I'm gonna wrap it up because everyone wants to hear you keep talking. So tell everybody how to find your platforms and where you're at right now.
So everything can be found at vidawithchristie.com, and that's VIDA with Christie.com. And Facebook, Instagram is at Vida with Christie, and Twitter it's VWC Podcast. And of course, you can listen to the podcast wherever you find your favorite podcast: Spotify, iTunes, everywhere else, basically. Yeah.
Perfect. Okay. And then the last question I ask everybody is, how are you the mom that your kid needs?
I am, I think, in line with, you know, this episode and how I live my life, is I'm the mom that my kid needs because I check myself. I'm not afraid to call myself out. I'm not afraid to know when I've made a mistake. I'm not afraid to be honest with my child. Just being real with your child, knowing that you're an actual human and not just, you don't have to be a super mom. We often just, you know, super mom this, super mom that. Like, you don't have to be a super mom all the time, you know? Giving your best, even if you're having a rough day, and your best at that day is just 10%. Like, you just literally fed them cereal. Like, I love it when last time we talked, you're like, I gave my kids cereal out of a bag today. And I'm like, yes. Because if that was your best that day, as long as your kids are safe, they're warm, you know, they have a roof over their head, like, that's what works for you. Like, that's okay. It's being real that not every day is going to look like a perfect Instagram profile, you know, because that's just not the reality. Mm-hmm. And that's why I often share things on my Instagram that are very real. Like, I go on Instagram on my reels and all that, no makeup, I'm cleaning my house, I'm doing everyday things. And I know I appreciate that you do that too, right? I love your TikTok. Mm-hmm. Just because that is real life. We don't need to, as moms especially, fall into the pressures of creating this, like, fake aesthetic to motherhood that is not our everyday, because our kids don't remember that mom. They remember the mom that probably, like, played in the sand with them at the beach, not concerned about what she looked like in a bikini. They just remember that their mom played with them that day. Right? So it's just being real with your kids. And that's, like, the best thing, because it's those little things that they remember that you don't even realize that they remember. Like, the other day, my daughter's like, do you remember when we went here and we saw this flower? And I'm like, what? Like, no. And she just went on about it, telling me, like, this moment, that's what they remember. It's those little moments, right? But you think this, like, me even, this is, like, calling myself out right now, this big lavish vacation or this big lavish, like, getaway is, like, the thing that they're gonna remember. But they remember the flower along the way. Like, you know? So, yeah.
Yes. Oh, that's so, like, your daughter is so lucky to have you doing all the work you have and all the work you'll continue to do, because we're not perfect, and it is a process, and it's just the process over the product, right? It's just the act of getting up every day and choosing again that it's worth it to continue this work, and to have the humility to apologize when it's not there, and keep trying the next day. I love your heart and how much you are just out there to help others and pave the way for them to be on this journey, even if it's a little bit easier to figure out a little bit quicker. They can do that by investing in their time with you. So thank you, Christie, for sharing your time with us.
Thank you for having me here. It was wonderful. It's always a pleasure chatting with you. And we could truly go on forever. So
literally, yes.
Maybe a few months down the road we'll get together again and chat it out.
Oh, for sure. Let's plan it. Yes.
Thank you so much, Danielle.
All right. Well, until then. Oh, that was a treat. Even if that was not recorded, I needed that. And even if you are not at the same place on your journey at all, or if you don't relate to any of Christie's story, you're still trying to wrap your mind around, making sense of your own childhood. The reason I share stories and, when people are a vulnerable open book is because it's so valuable to be able to learn more about yourself by comparing them with other people's stories and just being able to gain insight and perspective. So thank you for being dedicated to hearing that out and for challenging your own perspectives and for listening and committing your time and sharing it with me and my platform. It really, really means a lot, and your kids are lucky to have you seeking out these resources. So if you are finding value from these conversations, please leave a review on Apple Podcasts. It is the way that this podcast shows up in other people's search results. And I've talked to a lot of people lately that just randomly came across it and are so glad they did. So share the love and tell a friend. Find me on Instagram. I'm at parent_wholeheartedly. Thank you for coming on this journey with me. I believe in you and I'm cheering you on.